What are your thoughts on the Harris and Trump debate? Story 1, Harris won. I think the debate started strong for both candidates and they got progressively weaker. To be fair, Kamala dodged a few questions as well, but Trump was blatantly dodging them the whole time. The couple of times Harris dodged them, she at least was tactful and professional for a politician. Trump, when dodging questions, would use the time, often, to discuss unrelated subjects. Overall, Harris had better talking points and came across as strong and competent. I'm going to vote for Harris, so I'm biased in that aspect. While Trump had confidence and some level of directness in his speech, he lacked in competence and maturity. It was a very entertaining debate, even outside of politics. I particularly enjoyed when Trump said Harris wanted to give transgender operations to illegal aliens in prison. Story 2. My first thought was, man, the mimeosphere is going to be hot this week. I was in disbelief the whole time. Trump refuses to establish the bottom of the barrel and instead continues to dig. It's impressive, really. I didn't know a person could actually achieve his level of incompetence, callousness, and narcissism. Harris was poised, composed, dignified, and spoke eloquently. No notes. I think she absolutely clobbered him when he wasn't busy clobbering himself. Answer. I thought she had some real missed opportunities to steamroll his ass until I realized that wasn't the point. The point was to contrast them. He kept getting louder and angrier, whining and making up nonsense. He honestly sounded like one of his own supporters by the end. He was an angry, emotional mess, and she was cool and collected. She didn't have to come at him, like you said. He did all the work of making himself a fool for her. Story 3. Top takeaways for me. Kamala. I never asked if a victim was a Republican or Democrat. I asked if he was okay. Trump. The leader of the Taliban. His name was Abdul. I showed Abdul a picture of his house. He asked, "Why do you have a picture of my house?" I said, "You know why." Story 4. Please remember, former President Trump's fans are reading and watching their own news services right now, and they are thrilled. President Trump won bigly. They will all vote. Every Democrat needs to vote, every single one of us. Answer. Most of what I see is people bitching that ABC moderators were only fact-checking Trump. Then maybe he shouldn't lie all the time. Thought of that? You got a big problem with facts? Does the truth hurt? If your boy wasn't saying insane shit like, states are allowing abortions at 9 months and immigrants are eating dogs, maybe the moderators wouldn't need to step in. Story 5. A few things. How can you say a medical plan is bad, but 9 years later have a concept of a plan? If it's so bad, it should be easy to fix. 21 million people monthly would equate to over 1 billion people, 4-year term. The U.S. population is sub 350 M. Who did that math? Only a guy who filed for bankruptcy 6 times. Can I get some of that money Iran is spreading around? When did NATO become a for-profit organization? NATO doesn't pay the U.S. anything. Can I get some of that American military we're giving away? I'd love an F-22, please. Imagine not being aligned with your vice president. I was being sarcastic. If post-9 months abortions are happening, I got a few coworkers. Answer. 21 million people monthly would equate to over 1 billion people, 4-year term. The U.S. population is sub 350 M. Who did that math? Only a guy who filed for bankruptcy 6 times. No, it's quite simple. Let me explain this to you. See, what happens is the migrants come in from other countries and then immediately when they get here, they start killing, right? And this goes on for a couple of months. 21 million, 42 million, 63 million, 84, 105 million. By this point, migrants make up 1/3 of the population of the country, but they don't stop murdering. They keep killing, month over month, until all of us have died. The tipping point actually happened in July of Biden's 2nd year. That's when the migrants had killed every American. They'd killed your grandma, slaughtered your cousins. They stabbed your dad to death on the 4th of July weekend in his own backyard in his Kiss the Cook apron. Then, of course, they killed all the rest of the Americans, including all government employees, actors, singers, scientists, you and me. I'm surprised you don't remember this. But that didn't stop the migrants coming over, and once they got here, they just kept killing. So, now we have a situation where all the Americans are dead, and the first round of migrants are being slaughtered by the newly arrived migrants, who will continue to kill each other on what used to be our soil. That's why when you look outside, you see nothing but a Mad Max-style wasteland, with raiders driving all around the desert, shooting each other all the time. Anyway, hope I was able to clear that up. Story 6. This isn't exclusive to the Harris-Trump debate, but presidential debates in general. It drives me insane that politicians are seemingly allergic to answering yes or no questions. Edit. Well, this blew up. Obviously, yes/no questions aren't really helpful in a debate. Policies are nuanced and often require a metric ton of information to not only form an opinion, but also explain why that opinion is superior to an opponent. It's the empty off-topic and unproductive responses in place of yes or no that I have an issue with. Edit 2. While I'm here, do away with time constraints completely. The debate should go on until the moderators think a topic has been sufficiently answered by both candidates. I don't see the point in having a debate if no new or clarifying information has been discussed. I didn't learn a single new thing about either Harris or Trump tonight. In addition to the candidates, bring in experts and potential cabinet members to expound on the campaign's plan. IDGAF if it's 8 hours long. Let's actually have a discussion instead of a 90-minute finger-pointing session. Story 7. I don't understand how anyone can watch Trump talk and not think he's a complete narcissistic, incoherent buffoon. He always talks in ridiculous absolutes. Politics aside, just his character is enough to make you sick. I'm glad that Kamala is trying to focus on the future, and I think this was a slam dunk for her, but it's unsettling the election will likely be so close. Edit. I love Kamala telling him he got fired by 81 million people. You know that hit hard LOL. Story 8. I thought Trump had the edge for about 5-10 minutes. He was calm and gave straight answers. This is all relative, obviously. But as soon as Harris baited him with the rallies, he went off the rails and became a babbling mess. It's actually quite frightening that the potential leader of the free world was so easily triggered. His ego is so fragile. Story 9. Clearly, the U.S. electorate is deeply, deeply ed for this to be an even close race. No politician will say it because it's totally untenable to call out voters for their flaws. But that's the real story here. Allowing Donald Trump to still hang around and even be close in this race is a major embarrassment for the American voters. God help us all. Story 10. That for the first time, I'm starting to think Trump might lose. Before Biden stepped out, I was sure it was going to be a rout. After, I knew it'd be close, but was thinking Trump would pull it out. Now, I'm not so sure. He got bodied hard tonight. Not so much on policy, since no one ever actually offers policy in these debates, but just for how unhinged a lot of his comments were and how uncomfortable he was. Harris got under his skin in a major way. Story 11. I'm so tired of pretending that being a Trump fan is a valid or respectable position. I don't care if you dislike Harris or are a staunch conservative, but saying you think Trump is a real option to be president automatically disqualifies you from being considered a serious person. Story 12. My mom, a huge conspiracy theorist, called me up and said, "Wow, Kamala did really well. Whoever prepped her for this should get a huge bonus." That says a lot because before this, she called me nonstop talking crap about her. Fox News plays on repeat at her house. She ended with, "I guess if Kamala wins, I won't feel as bad as I thought I would." Answer. She's a former prosecuting attorney. This is kind of in her wheelhouse. It's in Trump's best interest not to debate her. It's like a trial where the guy wants to represent himself going against the attorney. Doesn't end well for the defendant. Story 13. Why is he allowed to dodge every question and insist on having the last word every time talking nonsense, mind you, but they want to cut her off when she's on topic and then allow him to ramble on further? WTF? Answer? I noticed this too. Lindsey Davis really pushed back on Kamala at that one point and wouldn't let her respond, but repeatedly let Trump steamroll her into letting him continue. I get the dynamic there, societally, how we are socialized, etc., but it was a bummer to see that she was more comfortable pushing back strongly with Kamala than Trump. It put Kamala in a not great position. Keep pushing back, trying to get your word in and appear angry, kick, or take the L and stop trying to get your point spoken. I just wish she let her talk and rebuke too in that moment. Story 14. Actual thoughts that went through my mind. Before debate. Why am I even watching this? They're both morons. During debate. Okay, Kamala, I'm listening. Wait, PPL are eating dogs? After debate, she mopped the floor with his ass and changed my mind about my previous perspective of her. She remained calm, well-spoken, positive, did not speak out of turn, but took the opportunity to get fiery when necessary. I can't remember a single actual statement Trump made. Story 15. Harris came off as someone who wanted to be there, ready to speak, and knew what buttons to press on Trump. Trump came off as if he was annoyed to be there, kept going off script and getting goaded into his dementia bubble. He came off as some bitter, angry old man who kept confusing the jobs of the president and vice president. Story 16. The big things that stuck after it was all said and done. Concepts of a plan? Lol, sure, Yan. Will that be ready in 2 weeks? Eating cats and dogs? Clearly, when he's not golfing, he's spending all his time with the crazies online. Abortions at 9 months? That's called murder, my man, and that is very illegal already. Angry, sour-looking man who can't stop his broken record of grievances. Feels like that old guy down the street you avoid at all costs because he doesn't make sense and won't shut up. Story 17. Harris did exactly what she needed to. She talked about her policies and attacked Trump to the point where he lost his cool. He didn't get to talk about any plans because of that. You can tell it was bad for Trump because Republicans are attacking moderators for fact-checking, not trying to say Trump did well. Meanwhile, pretty much everyone in the middle and on the left are praising Kamala. Story 18. Harris owned him. I wish she humiliated him more, but she struck the right balance. I think she may have picked up a state or two. Trump was ridiculous. He looked like he was falling asleep at the start, and then he was making his duck lips face whenever Harris was scoring points on him. When he had the microphone, he was slobbering and babbling about dog eaters and whatnot. He was out of control. His handlers will not be pleased. Story 19. I think Trump had a very bad night, and Harris had a very solid performance. The takeaway from tonight's debate will be how crazy Trump was. He was making wild claims about Democrats wanting to literally execute babies, immigrants eating people's pets, and trans surgeries on immigrant prisoners. The people who are persuadable are mostly people who think the lunatic side of Trump is overblown or taken out of context. They were shown tonight that it is not. The criticisms of Harris that the moderators came up with, she dodged questions, she didn't talk enough about policy minutia, are things that were applicable Trump than her, as in were. Yes, Trump was never able to make a point. He spent most of his available time responding to Kamala's talking points. And when you're doing that, it means you're being beat in a debate. Story 20. Trump started off relatively composed, but started to lose it when Harris began triggering him with facts he is unable to accept. He offered nothing of substance, only wild or baseless claims trying to disparage everyone but himself. He referenced Viktor Orban as a character witness, which was a terrible move. He refused to support a Ukrainian victory. He tried to hammer Harris on immigration and the economy, but came off as repetitive and desperate, again not offering anything or substance but using superlatives without support of fact to claim he would be so much better and Harris is so bad. Harris did what she needed to do. She riled up Trump, set up a stark contrast, reminded voters of how chaotic and undemocratic Trump's presidency and loss were. She had actual policy plans she could speak clearly and factually about, not just concepts of a plan. I wasn't terribly impressed by her answers about climate change, though she at least gave an answer, or the Afghanistan withdrawal. She also seemed stronger and more confident than Trump, minus a couple times when she tried talking over Trump, giving him an opportunity to turn it back on her. Overall, Harris won. I think it will influence some undecided voters. I don't think there will be another debate. Story 21, I think Harris did, quote, well in appealing to some of the audiences who have felt more abandoned by liberals while retaining her strong values too. I do think there was a couple times where if Trump was smart enough, he could have countered her better, but he wasn't, which isn't surprising. Story 22. He tries to point out things she hasn't done as vice president when he's literally been president before. He says if they can come up with something better than Obamacare, then they will implement it. So can he admit that it's been a positive thing? Why couldn't he and his team come up with something better when he has in fact been president before? Story 23. The debate as a whole seemed to shy away from policies and focused more on the past. I remember one clip from the Obama-McCain debates where McCain rejects personally attacking Obama when questioned by an audience member. I would like more of that. Politics is so divisive. Story 24. Another comment I thought was beyond nuts. The part when Trump repeated how people wanted to execute the babies after they were born. Who the hell said they wanted to do that? And even if one crazy person somehow believed this, I hardly think this is a common belief and an even less common practice. In fact, I've never heard of any state or state governor advocating this. What the actual F? Story 25. Trump refused to answer if it was in the interest of the U.S. for Ukraine to win the war, but he repeatedly said he would end the war. Translation, he wants to concede the war to Russia. Trump refused to say he would veto a national abortion ban. Trump showed how easily manipulated he is when Harris mentioned crowd-sized, deliberately laying the bait for him, and then he couldn't resist, and then went on to a rant about people eating cats. Harris performed exactly as I expect of her, on brand, professional, to the point. Also, somehow Trump has never talked to J.D. Vance about abortion? Really? You haven't talked to your own VP pick about one of the biggest issues in this election? Even if that's not a lie, which it is, that's a bigging red flag. Story 26. I cannot believe that the orange toupee gets a shoe in at all. He is ridiculous in all of the ways. He is a liar and has very much threatened the American people if he doesn't get in. The situation is likely to get much worse if he does get in. How is this even possible? His lies can be disproven over and over, so why does he still get to run at all? Story 27. SNL's skit should be playing Trump's rambling response, and then Maya Rudolph giving the replies we wish Kamala could make. They're aborting babies at 6 months after birth. Can we abort babies at 78 years after birth? Immigration, blah, blah. If we didn't allow immigrants into our country, where would you have found your wives? Story 28. Honest thought, downvote me or whatever, but hopefully this is a reality check for some. For the first 10, 20 mins it seemed even or even slightly in Kamala's favor, and her peak moment was for sure on abortion. However, it slowly became clear that she had prepared, but perhaps over-prepared to the point of being inflexible, being unable to stick the landing as it were. She came across as the calmer of the two most of the time. The problem was in her responses after her very obviously practiced and canned stances on issues. This is why Trump is, I won't say an effective debater or speaker, but can be hard to wrangle, and how he beat the Republicans initially. He would have a reply that was sort of on the topic and hit her back twice as hard with a very strong and gotcha rebuttal. She wasn't able to fight back against it effectively, and after enough of it, her body language and overall attitude fell a little. He stole her speaking moment. He got to speak last on lots of issues, and even though his mic was supposed to be muted, they unmuted it. He actually came after the moderators, sometimes even correctly for things. To his supporters, it's going to, perhaps correctly, look like a 3v1. TLDR, what I saw was 20 tilde mins of initial tit-for-tat, followed by 70 tilde of a war of attrition that, in my opinion, Trump will come off the winner of. Not saying he gets my vote, but yeah, happy to talk to folks a little bit if they'd like. I expect some amount of rage down voting, but whatever. Story 29. I've come to realize that I was never more left-leaning than before. It's Republicans rallying behind a senile old man who is a con man, a criminal, a usurper, and a truly disgusting person. I'm at a point where the R behind a name inspires absolute disgust in me. I don't think the Republicans we know today deserve political power in any form until they disband and regroup. They are compromised, and even when we get past Trump, the damage has already been done. Their integrity, or lack thereof, and reputation will stay in the minds of our generation and the generation behind us. Which is a shame because America deserves multiple parties to represent different points of views, not just Democrats. But as Republicans of today are, they just cannot be trusted. They must disband if they ever have hopes of convincing moderates ever again. Story 30. I think we had 90 minutes to see one candidate expressing a plan and the other pointing blame. So help me, if 40% of America saw that and thought Trump showed leadership, there's no changing their minds for the rest of their lives. He changed every subject to his rally points and outright lies. It was embarrassing to see him bring up pet eating and get beat down for it. I'm not saying Harris was as eloquent as Obama or Clinton, or as smart and experienced as the Clinton better half. I'm saying she was honest and clear and aspirational. It used to be that both candidates were as such. This debate should have been worth 40 EC points. Story 31. They're eating cats and dogs, transgender operations of illegal aliens in prisons. They do abortions after the 9th month. He completely demolished any chance at grasping a large amount of swing votes. He just sounded old, tired, crazy, and just beyond annoying. Oh, and he denied the 2020 election again. I don't even think Harris was that great. She was just good. But with how bad Trump looked, it made her look like a godsend. Story 32. Honestly, I was so angry after the last debate. When Trump started arguing about who was the better golfer, I assumed Biden would point out how immature he is to say something so stupid on such a stage, and then he just started arguing back like a child. I was as embarrassed as I was mad that had to be the guy I was voting for. I was immediately on board with Kamala, but tonight just made me feel excitement to vote that I haven't felt in a long time. Story 33. Harris sidestepped a few questions that I would have preferred some more accountability, or at least staying on the topic a bit better. When asked about her flip-flopping on certain issues, and did she feel any responsibility for the Afghan pullout debacle? Excellent questions, BTW. It was kind of like, don't want to answer, I'll attack Trump instead. Other than that, I actually thought this was a pretty okay to solid debate from her. Trump sounds like a literal madman, a boomer moron who thinks memes are reality. The man didn't sidestep the questions, he flat out ignored them and went on insane rambling tirades about the immigrants. Don't get me wrong. Illegal immigration is indeed a big issue, and I appreciate that Trump would supposedly attack this issue with a lot of vigor. The problem is that Trump already reneged on so many of his other campaign promises, it's difficult to imagine him being able to keep this one especially. This was a bad look for Trump. Story 34. Trump is certifiable and has clearly inherited his father's dementia. He is spreading lies and his statements are increasingly a buzzword salad bar. He needs a diaper change and a nice spot in the retirement home. It is beyond me how people can vote for enabling more of his insanity. Project 2025 was written by his closest advisors. They are the ones pulling his strings. If you value women, religious freedom, or separation of church and state, please vote blue. I'm nonpartisan and I'm voting for Harris. Story 35. At this point, the media is complicit. How many times will they give Trump a platform to go on and on unchallenged with outlandish lies and then thank him for saying them. The few times they sheepishly challenged what he was saying was pathetic. It's not partisan to say, no, you're unequivocally wrong. There is no such thing as after-birth abortions. That's just one example. Story 36. I am monumentally disturbed and disappointed. The Republican Party has been hijacked, and nobody has the balls to stand up and fight other than Liz Cheney. At a minimum, we need two sane, reasonably intelligent parties in order for this country to work. You know it, I know it, the Russians know it, the Chinese know it. Why in the hell do you think that they are trying so hard to keep this dumpster fire of a Republican Party going under Trump and his idiot supporters both in and out of Congress? If the Republican Party does not rid themselves of this cancerous individual, we are all in trouble. If that means that we have to have 4 years of Harris as president because every Republican stays home and doesn't vote, so be it. It is a better pill, but 4 more years of this nonsense that only helps the Russians and the Chinese undermine our country is not a viable option. Story 37, Kamala dominated. Trump unsurprisingly embarrassed himself repeatedly. Any maggots still voting for him need to be checked for brain damage, or at least to just say they're voting for him because they support racism, bigotry, authoritarianism, and the death of democracy, accountability, and personal liberty. Story 38. The real highlight for me was when Trump called Vice President Harris a slut on national television. What woman hasn't been called a slut by a ranting man-baby? The fact that she smirked at him instead of yanking his scrotum over his shitty hair is a testament to her iron will and grace in the face of stupidity. If there are any undecided women voters left, I'm sure that didn't do Trump any favors. Story 39. Harris showed why she was a prosecuting attorney. Trump was on the defensive, even on topics that should have been his strong points. She spent much of her time baiting him, and he spent most of his time taking the bait hook, line, and sinker. In the first debate, Biden lost by a very wide margin. In this debate, it was Trump who lost by a very wide margin. Will any of this affect the outcome of the election? I've no idea. We shall see in November. Story 40. The rest of the debate were fireworks, but their closing arguments really define what's going on. Trump used the entire closing statement to attack Kamala for what the Biden administration hasn't done. Kamala poked a bit at him for being unfit for office, but also talked about her policy goals for families and small businesses, and about being neighbors with disagreements again instead of enemies who point fingers. People might not agree with her policy positions, but I think anyone who says Trump did better in the debate tonight is being disingenuous. During his presidency, he said his plan to replace the ACA was going to be revealed soon, and now we're 4 years later, and all he said tonight was that he has a concept for a plan. He couldn't talk policy at all tonight. Story 41. Before, I liked Kamala. Now I really like her. My hate for Trump has also increased like it has every day. Kamala whooped his ass. Trump saying that immigrants are eating our cats and dogs. Trump saying that transgender operations are being performed in prison. Trump constantly interrupting and not answering questions. Now I really believe Harris will win. Story 42. That moment when she called out his inability to process that he lost the election was something I've wanted to see for years. She killed it. The bar for Trump was so low, and the bar for her was insanely high. Still, she did better than I could have hoped for, and he was a personified truth social thread. Dude couldn't finish a sentence. He legit looked like someone's racist grandpa. I saw it on TV. I got involved with the Taliban. I have a concept of a plan. Wild how people can see this and conclude that he's a better option. Story 43. As someone who has devoted their life to fighting fascism, this is one of the best nights of my life. Hanging out with friends and enjoying company, laughing together at the stupidness of what sad people want to do to us, petting my dog while telling him, I'm glad you're not in Ohio, and getting online to see that evil is being thoroughly embarrassed. It's amazing. Join the side of love. It's so much better here. Story 44. Conservatives. Yes, Trump acted like a complete lunatic for 2 hours and spouted nonsense conspiracy theories. But Kamala's answers weren't as thorough as they could have been. So since he didn't drop trow and shit in the floor while yelling the N-word with a hard R, he was clearly the winner. I feel like I live in bizarro world. Story 45. Trump couldn't respond directly to a simple question and admitted he has no plan. He seemed out of touch and unprepared on stage, coming off as foolish. I regret voting for him. He was impressive the first time, but now he seems too unstable. His refusal to answer whether he wants Ukraine to win raises concerns about potential ties to Russia. Story 46. This great negotiator thought Abdul was the leader of the Taliban. The only person I can think Trump may be referring to is the fourth in command of the Taliban, Abdul Ghani Baradar. But that means that 5 years later, Trump as president signed an agreement on behalf of America with a guy he thought was the Taliban leader, when in reality, he negotiated an agreement with the fourth in command. Is the art of the deal signing agreements with people you don't even know? Also, there was no 18-month period of peace either, pure fiction. Moreover, while the buck stops with Biden, the wheels of that disastrous evacuation from Afghanistan were set in motion by Trump. It's a very complex period, but Trump is absolutely not guilt-free. Viktor Orban is a terrible endorsement to have when attempting to run for the elected leader of the free world. What the? 9 years later and the guy still can't articulate a healthcare plan and is doing a "you'll get it when I'm elected." Most of America is older than the age of 12, dude. This doesn't work. Kamala has a gun? I mean, cool, I guess. The immigrants eating people's pets thing is the most deranged shit I have ever heard in a debate. The buck stops with the president. There are zero excuses. January 6th was a complete failure in leadership. It is a failure in leadership to not condemn white supremacists marching in Charlottesville. It is a failure in leadership to throw in with the Proud Boys. These are failures in leadership that are completely unacceptable for the office of the presidency, and the Trump should never be allowed to escape responsibility for that, even when he squirms. The buck stops with the president. The president has the responsibility to lead the country, and those were dismal failures in leadership, period. Really appreciated the debate moderators. Story 47. Europe and NATO must have crapped their pants when he refused to back Ukraine. The moderators turned Trump's mic on every time he said anything. They let him respond to everything, including to her responses. Moderator would give him a question, let him rant and ramble, go to Kamala for a response, then Trump would just start ranting and the network turned his microphone back on. It made the debate longer while preventing conversation on more topics. No questions about mass shootings or police violence. They probably ran out of time letting the guy with nothing to say ramble. Now that Biden is not running, Trump is lone weird grandpa in the race. Kamala has a pulse and doesn't talk like someone who struggles to stay focused. Story 48. I'm English. I was genuinely interested in what people see in Trump that makes this so important. However, he just talks bollocks, and the presenters do nothing to stop him prattling on. Whereas it felt they were much keener to shut down Harris. And Trump always seemed to be allowed to come back and get the last word. Terrible work by the moderators. Story 49 from my Facebook post. You're going to have quite a few people who are voting Democratic tout that tonight was all win. However, it was a schooling in rage baiting. Kamala knew exactly what to say to piss Trump off and continued with that game plan all night. In doing so, she missed several key points, including explaining why her policies had changed with things besides fracking. Her dancing around not pissing off Israel was also a short shot to me. There was also a point where he baited her perfectly for her to almost call him either a piece of shit or son of a bitch. She instead regained composure and just referred to him as former president. As someone who was not keen on her in 2020, who watched her tout Biden as unfit for office, and then backtrack very quickly upon getting the nod for VP, while she hit on a lot of great points, I was not 110% sold on her platform. However, I'm in that camp now where my alternative is a person who verifiably agrees foreigners are eating cats and dogs. He wants to be America's dictator, or her. It has to be her. She is more than qualified for the job, but I wish I had heard more policy instead of not going back rhetoric tonight. Edit. I'm getting downvoted for actually having a cohesive thought outside of "she murdered him" LOLs. I'm getting downvoted for not bootlicking like Trumpers do. I'm not going to blindly follow a candidate and not hold them accountable. Did she make a lot of great points? Yes, but she also dodged several good questions I would have liked to have heard the answer to instead of baiting the orange turd all night. Story 50. As an Israeli that does not know much about American politics but loves America, enjoys American politics very casually, and does not hold a strong preference between the two candidates, it seemed as if Kamala had answers to questions, plans to solve specific issues, while Trump kept reciting the threat of AW3, how Russia, Ukraine, and Hamas invasion would not happen if he would be president, and immaturely tried to offend her and Biden repeatedly. So all in all, I'm persuaded that Trump is a populist after this debate, while Kamala actually has substance in her candidacy. Story 51. Those who were voting for Trump before probably still are, and those who were voting for Harris before probably didn't change their minds. Those who were on the fence will probably lean towards Harris, if only because she spoke about hope for the future instead of despair about the past. The moderators didn't do a good enough job keeping either candidate on the hook for answering the questions. More often than not, neither of them answered the question, even when asked for a yes or no answer. I wanted to hear actual policy, actual plans for what they intend to do. Harris did this to a small degree with her talks about tax deductions for small businesses, as well as credits for new parents and first-time homebuyers. Those are tangible things that sound like they'll help the average American. I wish she had addressed exactly how she intends to ensure businesses like grocery stores stop profiteering off of the American people, and get prices back down. She had mentioned it in the previous weeks, and I was hoping tonight she'd lay out how she intended to do that. Trump, on the other hand, had zero policies. He kept going back to his usual shtick about the border. Every question he was asked, he talked about millions and millions of criminals coming into our country, eating our pets. When fact-checked on this, he said, well, I saw it on TV. Like what? Instead of telling us what he would do to earn our vote, he spent his time telling us why not to vote for Harris. There wasn't any substance. When asked about his plan to replace Obamacare, he had nothing. After talking about how bad it is for nearly a decade, he still has no idea how he'd replace it? Really? I wanted to hear actual plans, and of the two, I feel like Harris gave more substance to her answers. Trump looked angry and rattled the whole debate. As I said, I don't think this debate changed any minds on the left or the right, but I feel Harris's positive tone is probably more appealing to those in the middle. Story 52. I noticed he aligned himself with the Jan 6 mob when he said we, then corrected himself. You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech. Not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do. This group of people that have been treated so badly. Emphasis mine. Story 53. I'll say it. The divisiveness was expected but unsettling. VP Harris was the only one to show any attempt at unity. But now, even in this chat thread, there are people identifying as one party or another. We need to vote to stop them. Pack mentality. Team identity. The narrative ought to be, Americans need to vote according to their beliefs on policy. I registered as a Republican in 2004, but I didn't then and I won't now. Cast a vote for party affiliation. Instead, we should be voting for the best candidate who reflects our ideals and thoughts on policy. I hate this two-party system, but VP Harris is by far the better candidate of the two. Story 54. His comment about the cats and dogs being eaten was bizarre on so many levels. First, even if he actually thought one person did this, to extrapolate it to everyone is bizarre. But even more incredulous is why would you waste your very precious time in a debate to be president of the United States on such nonsense? Right there, it demonstrates a level of lack of critical reasoning skills that bodes extremely poorly for anyone vying for a top leadership position, let alone president of the United States. Story 55. I thought it was brave for the independent voters at the start to stand up and announce to the world that yes, they are morons. Especially the one lady who says she's informed, but still doesn't know who she's voting for and might not vote at all. After Trump getting destroyed tonight, she'll probably think that Kamala isn't presidential because of the elder abuse she did. If it wasn't clear, Kamala baited Trump all night. Anyone with a brain could see he's unhinged, a beta male. It's clear he can be manipulated. He's not smart and obviously senile. Any independent voter at this point is either lying or just too stupid to be allowed to vote. Story 56. As one of the harshest critics of Kamala Harris and her 3.5 years as VP, I think she was masterful. She came in prepared, she stuck to a plan, and she felt very comfortable at the podium. I could even see the lawyer in her finally showing up after years of being absent. Given the relatively short amount of time she had to prepare for this, I could tell that she did her homework and practiced. She, quite frankly, looked presidential in her own unique way. Trump was Trump, Nuff said. Story 57. It's funny to me because Harris could be the worst candidate possible right now, and no one would ever know because they're too fixated on Trump, trying to convince people that there are states which make it legal to murder babies after they're born and blames illegals for eating animals. I also think it's funny that he caused a riot on Capitol Hill because he convinced his base that they stole the election, and then this week casually lets loose that, yeah, I lost by a slim margin. Like, holy shit, if you vote for this man, you're bereft of any moral compass whatsoever. Story 58. This is a rare time where I venture outside of my sneaker snark subs, and I just wanted to say thanks to the many sane people I've seen posting in this thread. I don't have a very high opinion of us, USA, as a society, and reading this thread helped raise it somewhat. I still have a measure of distrust in Kamala, but I'm still voting for her this year because I really don't want to do 2016 to 2020 again. I'm tired, boss. Story 59. Harris had a good night. She came across as the more poised and sensible of the two. Like Biden, some of her proposals are well-intended but ill-conceived. Tax credits for home buying, student loans, price controls. Others were vague, mediating wars, relations with China. Trump seemed frazzled and angry. To put it in his terms, he is much more low energy these days. Seemed like 2016 Trump on Prozac. He had ammunition against Harris on the border, Afghanistan, and the Biden admin's response to rising inflation. However, he could not articulate himself without repeating the same talking points. He also stood by poor policies such as tariffs on imports and mass deportation. I'm not a fan of how Harris came to be the nominee, and despite being a Democratic voter, I was seriously considering not voting for president. The debate performance put the stark choice this November back into perspective. I think I will vote for Harris and hope she can bring the same level-headedness and decorum she exhibited last night as president. Story 60. Well, as expected, Kamala Harris completely dominated Tangerine Mussolini. He was predictably unhinged, full of crap, and accused the Biden-Harris administration of just about every criminal or treasonous offense he himself committed as POTUS. Sadly, the MAGA morons are so corrupt or stupid that they either don't care or don't comprehend how unfit a vicious lunatic Trump is. As for the incomprehensibly undecided voters who watched, if they can't see the difference, and the only sane choice at this point, they deserve the nightmare hellscape of another Donald Trump presidency dictatorship. It's just a pity the rest of us are at the mercy of their ignorance. Story 61. Trump stands alone as the most stupid, corrupt, self-interested president America has ever known. If this were the Batman universe, Trump being re-elected would compel the League of Shadows to burn the country to the ground, which is ironically exactly what Trump is willing to do to become president again. He represents the worst of the GOP's weasel-like power-at-all-costs instincts, and Republicans deserve to be out of power for a generation for enabling this moron to walk free, let alone run for office. I'm not American and have no skin in this game. But if you are from the U.S., please vote. Vote early, vote blue, vote down the whole ballot. Story 62. As normal, CBS did not follow the rules. They bent over for Trump. Trump was allowed to talk when not his turn, and rebuttal to Harris answers. She was not afforded the same consideration. Also, the CBS MAGAs addresses Trump as president. It should have been former president. I believe Joe Biden holds that title. CBS, you suck. Story 63. I feel like Harris composed herself much better, and I suspect that feeling is pretty much universal, but I was still left with a rather unsettled feeling after the debate. Donald Trump has the support of roughly half of voters in this country. Do half of voters really prefer an angry old man screaming about immigrants and calling our country a failed nation? That irritates me that so many people would attach themselves to someone so over-the-top negative. I mean, he didn't give me a single moment where he seemed like he was optimistic and looking forward to doing something good for America. It was just all doom and gloom. Story 64. Ponder for a moment that a decent chunk of Republicans think Trump did a good job and are mad that he was fact-checked. Let that sink in and fester. Also earlier today, a bunch of MAGA went into an Advice Animals post about Trump saying liberal states are allowing after-birth abortions, and claimed Trump never said that and we're all crazy. Trump said it again in this debate, icing on the cake, immediately fact-checked. Story 65. It's been a long time since I've heard anyone sound as truly nuts as Donald Trump. I don't think he said anything of actual substance, not a single positive word about anything, just unhinged rants left and right. America is shit. World War III soon. Israel gone on 2 years. 21 million people a year crossing the borders. He rebuilt our entire military somehow. Illegal immigrants are just running around eating our pets. He had nothing to do with anything bad ever. He thinks solar is shit and a waste of space. Takes the whole Sahara just to power anything. Yet he's a fan. People are running around getting post-birth abortions. He's the best president ever. With the greatest economy in the history of the country. Most jobs ever, most this ever, most that ever. Nothing but exaggerations and lies the entire debate. Harris at least tries to spin this nonsense in a positive direction and say something with actual substance and say something that could give someone hope for the future. Trump right after, this nation is shit. It's crumbling. We are doomed. He's a joke, and so is the entire Republican Party for allowing him to have any shot at the presidency again. It's just sad, really. Story 66. Okay, let me see if I remember all his talking points. Criminals are running rampant, and it's a travesty. Except for convicted criminals like him. Illegal transgender immigrants are getting free sex changes in prisons, probably thanks to Obamacare. And when they get out, they are eating our cats and dogs. Women are allowed to abort their babies after they give birth. The doctor just asks them what they want to do, and they just set the baby aside until they decide whether the full-term already birthed child should be aborted or not. Putin is Trump's buddy, and he will just turn off the war with Ukraine when Trump tells him to. Kamala really hates Israel. And the Jews, and the Arabs too, and the war in Ukraine is her fault. January 6th never happened. The police were violently attacking the protesters, and it was Nancy Pelosi's fault, and he had a tape of her admitting it, but it's probably been destroyed. God, did I miss anything? Story 67. I didn't watch the whole debate, but I don't think she delved into serious topics like economics hard enough. I'm used to presidential debates in my country, France, where candidates have to very precisely explain their program using actual data and are judged on that. That being said, Harris debated Trump the only way he can be debated, by letting him spit his unhinged BS and calling him out on it and on his many previous failures. So IMO, she did good. Story 68. Speaking as objectively as I possibly can, Trump was rattled at best and a blithering has-been at worst. I'd like to have heard more specifics from Harris, but I'm honestly not sure how much more one can fit into 2-minute responses and 1-minute rebuttals when sharing the stage with a boomer with zero verbal self-control, butting in almost every chance he gets. His strategy seems to have been to just say ridiculous things over and over that are impossible to prove in hopes that his base will continue to believe the gloom and doom he regularly hawks at his rallies. He also uses far too many absolutes to be taken seriously. I wish that Harris had been more careful about some of the claims she made, specifically regarding Trump's stance on a national abortion ban, which he admittedly has been mostly clear about. She also could have pulled back a bit on her smirks and chuckling, but my guess is that those were her actual reactions to what he was saying. If that was the case, then obviously the point is moot. At the end of the day, it should be painfully obvious to anyone who is actually paying attention that one of them is a coherent, intelligent, albeit presidentially untested candidate, and the other is an orange, adolescent former president whose actions and words say far more about him than he will ever realize. Story 69. He doesn't have any plans except for tariffs and Project 2025, which he has nothing to do with except that there are a lot of good ideas, some not so good, but a lot of people like it. He's too cowardly to actually say what he'll do. If a national abortion ban passes Congress, he'll totally sign it, but he won't admit it. All of his arguments are windmills. People are eating cats because of Biden. Not true. Immigrants are cause a massive crime wave. We're at a 30-year low in crime. Immigrants commit fewer crimes than natural-born citizens. Crime is lower under Biden than it was under Trump. Ukraine and Israel wouldn't have happened if he were president. The withdrawal in Afghanistan would have been perfect if he were president. Kamala drop-kicked him on Russia. Trump would just give the Ukraine to Russia. His rebuttal was how many Russians needlessly died. He said that she put out as a jab that the only way a woman could be successful was sleeping around. Way to prove that you aren't a creepy pedophile, rapist, serial sexual predator. Kamala was positive and on message. She makes America great. Story 70. The path to winning this debate for Donald Trump was to just play the hits. Every person in America knows everything they could possibly know about him. Run the ball as you will. Instead, he said Democrats want to legalize infanticide and that immigrants were eating pets. An amazing way to walk right into the weird rake over and over like an orange or somehow more bloodthirsty sideshow Bob. Answer. Oh, how I wished Kamala would have just addressed the camera audience after his eating pets comments and just asked, America, I just said that Trump is not concerned with the issues affecting you. I want to ask you, have you, or anyone you know, been impacted by your pets being eaten by immigrants? Just drill at home what was wrong with everything Trump said tonight. He's fighting only to win an election. Every point is just to win an election for him. He does not have any concern for the American people. Even his biggest talking point, immigration, if you actually listen to Trump, is solely a concern for him because it allegedly gives the Democrats a lead in the election. That's what he rails on illegal immigration. Because he thinks it hurts his chances of election, not because of the supposed impact it is having on American lives.